Greetings all, Shane Bruce, Restomod Daisy with part 2 of what was going to be a one-chunk video wherein we take our oiled stock that we've put 4 coats of oil on, as you can see from the glow and the gleam and the glisten, and now we're going to do the final job. So the final job involves using some 320 grit sandpaper, extra fine finish, and what we're going to do is soak it down with oil again, dip the 320 grit paper in the oil bath, and use it to knock the burr down. And that will be the end of the process. So we'll dump some more oil in here, because we're probably going to burn up more oil in this part of the process than we did in treating the stock to begin with. Let's start with the forearm, because that's fairly simple stuff. So get her good and wet, because what we're going to do when we knock the whiskers off is we're going to cut those into tiny little bits of wood, and the theory is that the slurry formed by the oil and the whiskers will assist in filling any tiny little gaps, tiny little crevasses, or any other inconsistencies in the surface of the wood. When we get finished with the process, we will wipe it down to remove slurry that didn't get worked into wood, and then put yet another coat of oil on it and off the side to dry. So when you're working on this kind of stuff, you want to work the sandpaper in a circular motion. Now let's see if we can get this. If you'll notice here, as we sand it, see how much lighter that gets? So what we're doing is knocking the whiskers down, but we're also trying to highlight the difference in color between the yellow undertones that we put on the core maple and then the dark mission brown that infiltrated the curl or the fiddle or the wiggle or the waggle, whatever you want to call it. So when I'm doing this process, what I'm doing is just working in a circular motion, trying to get some slop built up. You'll see it show, and you'll see a shift in the tone of the wood. It'll lighten up quite a bit. Now after you've made a few passes, you want to run your finger down it, and even with the glove on, you'll be able to tell it's much smoother than the wood surrounding it, and that is part of the process as well, because when we're done with this stock, we want it to be smooth and buttery to the taste. That's been the descriptions I've heard customers tell me about it, and it's a real pleasure to handle as a result of that. It doesn't have a plasticky feel. It actually feels like real wood to your hand, and then your eyeball reinforces that. And here we can see how much more the curl is situated as opposed to down here, where the lightness isn't allowed to shine through. So we'll continue this process on the forearm, and when we get done with that, we'll move over to the buttstock, which is a little bit different beast. This was a really nice piece of wood to work with, though. Keep flooding the surface with your fresh oil, although used oil isn't bad. I'll dip it off the paper here in a bit after it builds up some, because oil is oil. And I don't need to spend any more money on the process than I already do. Part of the dealio is to reach out to the general public that might be interested in doing this themselves and showing them it's something you can get done and you're not going to spend a ton of money on. I mean, most of the products, aside from the wood that we use to modify the daisies, are commonly available at local big box stores. And you know, I'm talking about the big orange and the big blue. Now, if you've got a local hardware store, you'll probably have a better selection, although prices will be a bit more. And if you're a gambling kind of guy or gal and don't mind taking a shot on something you haven't actually picked up and put in your hands, of course, the internet is full of opportunities to buy all sorts of products. Sandpaper, oil. You can even buy wood on the internet, although my investigations have shown that you're probably better off going to a local hardwood supplier, because so much of that is eyeball, and you can't get eyeballs on stuff on the internet. You can't see the shift in figured wood the way it happens in real life, because you can't flip the page, you can't angle it, you can't throw it left, can't throw it right. So I would say keep your wood buying as a personal trip. You're just going to have to make the effort to go out and find it. It'll be a mighty hunt, but it is enjoyable. You'll meet some of the nicest people. Guys that run small mills are super nice to talk with. They've been at it for a while. They're real wood geeks. You know, geeks of any type are fun to talk with, as long as you can speak some of the language and you share some of the characteristics of geekdom with them, like an extreme interest in a particular subject area. Oh, I don't know, like daisies, or like powder burners. I mean, the world of guns is wide and varied indeed. But because they are powder burgers, they're expensive to shoot. It's not like one of these Red Riders where you can run down and pick up, oh, I don't know, 4,000 BBs for about $1.50 and shoot for a long time in any environment and get your rifle fix. So as we work it down, you'll see that the color is shifted. We'll compare it to what we see above us. The yellows are more prominent, and we're looking for that because that's going to make the curl look even better. Up close, it's beautiful. At 10 feet, it is spectacular. And what makes it really cool is you just don't see this kind of wood on guns. This is something that you see in museums. Curly maple is, for some reason, like unobtainium, and it's not. I mean, I get mine from a regular hardwood supplier, and they actually buy it from a furniture shop up North Carolina that does a whole lot of cabinet work, and they want clear maple. They don't want figured maple, because figured maple is, as you know, irregular. And irregular doesn't make really nice cabinets. Now, I suppose if they had an order for a complete set of fiddleback cabinets, they would be hunting around for some. But given that a certain percentage of the loads they bring in from the mills that they buy from is figured maple, I don't know how hard they'd have to look. But their reticence works out for small guys like me who look for this kind of wood for very special applications. So there we go. Now we've got this one about done. It feels the way it ought to feel. There's no roughness on the surface. And we have achieved our goal of lightening it up enough to allow the wood underneath to contrast with the curl and the fiddle. And theoretically, because of the way we're sanding it, we've packed in wood fibers and oil in any of the tiny, tiny holes in the surface of the wood that might have been there. So now, what we'll do is we'll wipe it down once, and we'll take a look at it and compare it to the buttstock. And I think you'll see the difference that sanding the whiskers down when you get done with it makes in the way the wood looks totally. Is that the same basic piece of wood? Came out of the same blank. Totally different look. Now, we're going to coat this down with oil, and we're going to set it off to the side. Let it have another opportunity to suck some of this Danish oil up and help smooth out that finish a bit. Now, the step after this is we just stick it up off on the side in a spot where it won't get banged on, beat on, knocked over, or knocked about. And we will... Oh, wait a minute, forgot to do that. Take that down just a bit. Where it will quietly sit for 3 or 4 or 5 days. And at the end of that period of time, we will buff out the finish. And when we get the finish buffed out, it'll have much better shine and be even smoother than it is to the touch right now. After that, after buffing, put a little coat of wax on it. Hand buff it for a bit more. Shoot some more BBs through it. And then it is ready to go to its new home, which I'm sure it's going to be excited about. The new owner is excited already. So there we go. That's a super glossy, super slick. You're not going to get it this way from me. Look when it's wet. Now we'll lay this off the side, keep it out of the way, and get on buttstock. Now, being a bigger chunk of wood, a little bit more wiggle factor involved with this, but it's the same basic process. You just start working it on the buttstock in circular motions. This has got to be the most exciting video I've ever done. Although I kind of enjoy doing it because I like watching it change. But we'll find out when we get it posted. Now here you can see again the same process. As we sand it flush, get the whiskers knocked off, you begin to see the chatoyance from the curl. And the curl, which looked vague and indiscriminate when we started, becomes more defined. And that's because the lighter wood helps define it a little more. So when you get into these areas here where there's a cut, like this section we're working on right now, there are exposed grain ends there. Chunks of wood actually have the ends of the wood themselves, the fibers are exposed. So they're going to really suck the oil up. And when we get to the buffing phase, they will appear quite a bit darker than the rest. You'll see a highlight rim like we're looking at right there on the cheek piece. And it's just the nature of, wood. If you get the fibers all in line, then it has a uniform texture. And in some wood, that's what you're looking for. But in wood like this, you want that contrast. All right. Now this work can get a little bit of a drag because your hands cramp up. But it isn't that much more to do. And look at the way that cheek piece is flashing. Oh, it's going to be so nice. So just keep working your sandpaper. Reverse your sides. You're not cutting a lot of heavy material, so you're not wearing the paper out excessively. We will swap out to a new piece here in just a minute, though. If you want to get that work done, you want to run your finger through it. Just check it for smoothness. And if you're concerned about what's smooth and what isn't, check a chunk you've sanded and then check a chunk you haven't. You'll see the obvious difference there. It doesn't take a whole lot of work. And you don't want to go too hard because you don't want to take too much off. You want to accentuate the curl, but you don't want to go down to bare wood. And it's possible to do that. You get a little carried away in a spot. And the cool thing about maple is, aside from figured maple, is the wood takes the stain in such a fashion that you can actually see, especially on the cuts that have contour, the different layers of the wood that you've gone through to get to the form you want. That's kind of neat. All right. So we're up there. We're about finished on the curl, on the comb. Yeah, we're getting there. Let's get the back end done. Time to start using some of our slop oil. And on some of these profiles, you're not going to be able to do a circular motion just because of the way they're cut, So sand what you got the way you can. The idea is to knock the hair down, get the whiskers gone. All right, let's go back to this side. Now this ought to be pretty interesting. Matter of fact, I'm going to swap to a new piece of paper because there's a big shift on this side of it. Occasionally I'll be working on a piece that's got a combination of sapwood and heartwood. And in maple, the heartwood is a different tone. It's a little grayer than the white sapwood. But a tree that has figure, or had figure, during its growing environment, will always exhibit that figure. Sometimes it'll come and go on the plank, which is why you'll see areas where you've got heavy figure, and then areas quite close to it that don't seem to have been affected by the figure-inducing process at all. Another thing you'll notice if you work on a lot of stocks, or even just a few stocks, is in figured wood you'll run into the occasional eyeball, which is kind of weird. Like this little guy right here, a little blim. That's in the wood itself. Doesn't really look like an eyeball, but kind of like looking at clouds. Stare at it long enough, you might see anything in the world. All right, so that's lightening up quite a bit. And here you can see the pattern of the lumber as we've sliced down through different layers of it. Tree ring growth. And we're getting our touch to where we want it to be. So we're about done with this side. That's quite nice. All right, we'll do the toe plate. Now on a Restomod stock, you'll always discover, or always encounter, this flat section at the base of the stock, the belly of the stock. And that's kind of a tribute to the long rifles of days of yore. That was a common feature on almost every Kentucky I've ever seen. I've never seen one that had a fully tapered belly. They've always stopped at a flat spot. And most of them had a brass inlay here that complemented the butt plate. And I'm sure that was installed as a wear prevention item, because the guns of the day, back in the day, had a rough life. They were used daily, fired a lot, because they were working tools, things that kept folks alive. And the skills that you acquired with your long gun were critical to your well-being and your family's well-being. It's an essential part of being a frontiersman. Frontier women, too. They could shoot well. Getting groceries was getting groceries. Whether you went fishing or went out and bagged a rabbit or two, maybe picked up a few squirrels for the stew pot. Protein's protein. So you work the wrist of the stock is where you'll find the most contour, because of the fact that it's supposed to be slightly circular. There's some interesting stuff going on there. So once you've done your profiling right and you've selected the right piece of wood, and you've gone to all the trouble to get a glue up done, which is what this is. This is actually a diet fat bob. It's a variation on the two basic stocks I build. But the customer's requirement was he wanted a bit thinner than the last fat bob he got from me. So what we did was we wound up taking about 35 thousandths off the average width, and hence the phrase diet fat bob. It's not quite as fat as a fat bob usually is. And I gotta say, it's a little daintier when it was in the white and back on the gun for fitting purposes. It was a difference in heft you could tell. Get one in there. So I'll probably end up having, I guess, 3 versions now: the diet fat bob, the fat bob, and the slim jim. Although I'm dying to build a Mandalorian stock. And once I get my build backlog under control, maybe I can do some more experimentation later this year. But at the moment, it's full steam ahead here at Restomod to try and get our existing customer orders satisfied. Here we go. Now you can see some of the difference there when the darkness starts to fade and you start to pick up some of the figures of the wood. We're about done on this one. So we'll wipe her down and give her another final coat of oil, and then we'll be able to actually see, although I don't know if you'll be able to remember, but you'll be actually able to see a difference in the before and the after. So here we go. Now, that looks much different than it did when we started. Much different. There's a lot more fiddle in there than I thought we were going to wind up with. So, as you wipe it down, take a look, do a visual check, do a feel check, make sure that there's no rough spots on the presentation sides. And it feels right. And be careful now, because when we get done with the process of sanding, now we're done with oiling and sanding, we've got to collect our waste products, because the Danish oil does have chemistry in it, mineral spirits actually, and is capable of a flash fire. Now, that's a horrible thing to think about. It's never happened here, but that's because we do take pretty extreme care of our waste products, and by that I mean the rags we've used to wipe the guns with, the piece of paper we wrapped them on. Let's see now. Take a look at that. Is that a good looking? That's a good looking stock. Man, let this stuff get dried up and get it on get it buffed. It's going to be phenomena. All right, so we got all the slurry wiped off to the best of our ability. Now we're going to go ahead and put another coat of oil on it. And at long last, this video will be done. So here we go. I'll just slop some more Danish oil on it and let it sneak in there however best it can. Well, we have eliminated the whiskers, so they're not around to stand up, but they're also not around to channel either. So, you know, it probably isn't going to, this last coat won't penetrate as deep as the previous ones did. But it will be finito Well, at least up to this phase, this part of the process. We still have to buff it out after it dries up. Look at that. Oh man, look at that roll. Ah, so nice. I tell you what, guys and gals, you might not think woodwork is your thing, but I swear to God, if you give it a shot, you might decide you like it, because it's material you can handle without really any special tools other than some determination, a couple of hand files, some sandpaper. And with the internet being the place it is, learning how to do this kind of stuff is not at all difficult. So we'll set those up. Pardon me. We'll clean up our mess, and we will call it a day. That's all we got for you today, kids. This is Restomod Daisy. Shane Bruce, signing off.